Hello, friends. Today, I want to talk to you about something that may sound harsh. In fact, it may sting a little at first, but it's not meant to hurt you. It's meant to free you. And that message is nobody cares about you. At least, not in the way you think they do. Now, hear me out. We spend so much of our lives waiting for permission, waiting to be noticed, waiting for someone to rescue us, validate us, believe in us more than we believe in ourselves. But the truth is, the world isn't sitting around thinking about you. People are not waking up wondering if you'll succeed or fail. They're too busy thinking about themselves. And there is power in that realization, because once you understand that nobody is coming to save you, you realize that you are enough to save yourself. You stop performing, you stop waiting, and you start living, creating, and becoming. So let this truth empower you. Nobody cares about you until you care about you. And when you do, the world starts to notice. It's a difficult truth to accept at first, especially in a world where social media has conditioned us to believe we are always being watched, judged, or celebrated. The truth is, most people are not thinking about you nearly as much as you imagine. They are consumed by their own lives, their own doubts, deadlines, relationships, fears, and desires. This doesn't mean people are unkind or selfish by nature. It means they are human. And as humans, we are wired for self-preservation. This isn't cynicism, it's realism. And realizing it can set you free from an invisible prison. So many of us hold back from doing what we really want to do because we think someone might laugh, judge, or reject us. We imagine a crowd of critics watching our every move, when in reality, they're not watching at all. Most people are too busy thinking about what you might be thinking about them. It's a loop of imagined judgment, keeping everyone stuck and small. This fear, this illusion, holds people hostage their whole lives. But once you understand the truth, you begin to feel lighter. There's an incredible relief in realizing that no one is really tracking your every move the way you are. And that realization can become your starting line. You begin to stop performing for an audience that was never really there. You stop tiptoeing through life, trying not to offend, not to fail, not to stand out too much. And you start moving boldly in the direction of your purpose. You stop making decisions based on how it might look and start asking yourself how it feels. The spotlight that you thought was blinding you was actually never turned on. So now you can walk your own path without flinching. Consider this. How many times in your day do you think deeply about someone else's mistakes or fears? Probably not many. You have bills to pay, people to care for, emails to answer, and wounds to heal. And that's exactly what everyone else is doing too. They might glance at your misstep or your attempt or your victory, but then they go back to their own life, just like you do. So why give their passing attention the power to direct your entire life? What you perceive as judgment from others is often just a mirror of your own insecurities. When you think people are criticizing your every move, it's often because you are criticizing yourself. You've projected your self-doubt onto the world and assumed it's coming from them, but it's not. You're the one thinking about your failures. You're the one replaying that awkward conversation. You're the one overanalyzing your progress, not them. And when you realize this, you can start to turn that energy inward in a more constructive way. Now, this doesn't mean no one ever notices you or that you don't matter. It means that your freedom begins when you understand that you are not the center of everyone's world, and that's okay. In fact, that's liberating. It means you can make mistakes without the whole world watching. You can grow in the shadows before you shine in the light. You can try, fail, try again, and nobody's keeping score. You have space and grace to evolve at your own pace. The moment you let go of this imaginary audience, you reclaim your life. You stop shaping your choices around invisible critics and start making them based on your values, your truth, and your goals. You'll begin to ask better questions. Does this align with who I want to be instead of what will they think of me? And that simple shift is the beginning of authenticity. You won't need to chase approval anymore. because you'll have something better: self-respect. So, when you start to feel paralyzed by the fear of being judged or misunderstood, remember this: most people aren't thinking about you, not because you don't matter, but because they're thinking about themselves. And that's the same permission you get to claim for your own life. You are free to live boldly, try openly, and fail gracefully. No one's watching as closely as you think, and that's your power. From the moment we're born, most of us are taught to look outward for approval. We ask our parents if we're doing it right. We wait for teachers to raise a grade before we feel smart. We hold off on calling ourselves artists, entrepreneurs, or leaders until someone else uses those words first. And so we grow up carrying this belief that in order to move, to act, to become, someone has to grant us permission. But here's the hard truth. If you're waiting for the world to tell you it's your time, you'll be waiting forever. The people we wait on for permission, they're not withholding it because they don't believe in us. Often, they're just not thinking about us at all. They're not sitting around wondering when you'll start that business or write that book or take that risk. That's not their job, it's yours. Too often we sit still, quietly hoping someone will notice our potential and invite us to use it. But life doesn't hand out invitations, it hands out opportunities dressed like uncertainty, and only those who give themselves permission will ever unwrap them. Think of all the dreams, ideas, and innovations that never saw the light of day because someone was too afraid to begin without being told they were ready. The irony is, no one ever feels completely ready. Readiness is a myth sold to people afraid to start messy, waiting until the stars align, until you're perfectly qualified, until everyone supports you. It's a polite way of saying you're afraid. And fear doesn't disappear with more waiting. It gets louder, bolder. It becomes your decision maker if you let it. We must learn to approve of ourselves, not in arrogance, but in ownership. You don't need someone to nod before you speak your truth. You don't need applause before you walk your path. You don't need a title to live in purpose. The moment you decide that you are enough, not someday, not later, but now, is the moment your life begins to accelerate. Because that's when you stop stalling and start becoming. This idea of waiting for permission shows up in the smallest ways. We hold back in meetings until someone else speaks up. We hesitate to post our art or ideas online in case no one responds. We dim our talents to avoid making others uncomfortable. We minimize our passions to stay realistic. All of it comes from this deep-rooted belief that someone else's opinion has more authority over our lives than our own instinct. But that's a lie, a learned lie, and it can be unlearned. When you stop waiting for permission, you stop outsourcing your power. You stop living in reaction to other people's timelines and start creating your own. You take initiative. You take responsibility. You understand that it's not confidence that comes first. It's courage. And courage means acting before you feel ready, speaking before you feel sure, and stepping forward even while you're still afraid. That's how leaders are born, not from external validation, but from internal decision. The truth is, the world doesn't need more people sitting quietly waiting to be picked. It needs more people who pick themselves, people who raise their hands before they're fully prepared, people who walk through the door before they're completely sure what's on the other side, people who trust that the path will rise to meet them even when the way looks uncertain. These are the ones who make change, not because they were chosen, but because they chose themselves. So the next time you find yourself hesitating, wondering if you're allowed to begin, if you're worthy of trying, if you're qualified to dream that big, remind yourself the only permission you ever needed was your own. And you've had it all along. It's one of the hardest truths to swallow, but also one of the most powerful. No one is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your partner, not your boss, not a mentor, not a miracle. It's not because people don't care. Many of them do, but they can't carry the weight of your transformation. Your life is your responsibility. Your healing, your success, your growth, These are things that belong to you and only you. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you become unstoppable. We grow up watching stories where the hero is rescued at the last minute. A prince shows up, a coach discovers you, a company gives you your big break, and we internalize this belief that our moment will come when someone else sees our value. But the real world doesn't work like that. In reality, your breakthrough doesn't come when someone arrives to lift you out. It comes the moment you decide to rise up on your own. It is not cinematic, but it's real, and real is where change actually happens. Many people waste years stuck in situations they despise, silently hoping that something or someone will come along to offer a way out. They tolerate toxic environments, dead-end jobs, broken relationships, all while praying for an external shift. But the truth is, you can't wait for conditions to change before you choose yourself. That moment may never come. And if it does, you'll be so out of practice with courage that you won't know how to receive it. Your freedom lies not in someone else's hands. It's been in yours the whole time. The moment you stop looking outward for rescue, your entire world begins to shift. You stop blaming others for your stagnation. You stop resenting people for not giving you what you never gave yourself. And you start asking better questions. What can I do with what I have right now? What step can I take today, even if it's small? Ownership like that is uncomfortable, but is also where your power lives. That's where real change begins. Not in fantasy, but in discipline, in daily choices, in the small moments when no one else is clapping and you show up anyway. It's easy to romanticize the idea of a rescuer. It takes the pressure off. If someone else is coming to save you, you don't have to act yet. You don't have to risk or stretch or take the blame. But that comfort is a trap. Because while you wait for someone else to move, your life stands still. And no one feels that stagnation more than you. Eventually, even the people around you will move on with their own lives, their own battles, and you'll be left in the same place, only older and more frustrated because you gave away your agency without realizing it. Choosing to save yourself doesn't mean doing everything alone. It doesn't mean isolating or refusing help. It means understanding that no help matters unless you're ready to act on it. Support is powerful, but only when you're willing to take the first step. A friend can offer advice, a mentor can open a door, but they cannot walk through it for you. You have to build the courage to stand, to walk, to climb, and some days that will be exhausting, but those are also the days that shape you the most. And when you do begin to save yourself, when you stop waiting and start moving, something incredible happens. People start showing up differently, not because they've changed, but because you have. You're no longer pleading for rescue. You're building, creating, choosing. And suddenly the right kind of support starts to appear, the kind that matches your energy, not pities your helplessness. Because people aren't drawn to desperation. They're drawn to momentum. So remember, no one is coming to hand you your dream, your healing, or your freedom on a silver platter. But that's not a tragedy. It's an invitation to stand up, to take the first step, even if your legs are shaking. Because once you realize you are the one you've been waiting for, everything changes. Not because someone arrived, but because you did. Rejection hurts. There's no denying it. It stings when you put your heart into something, a project, a relationship, a dream, and it's turned away. Whether it's being passed over for a job, ignored by someone you care about, or receiving criticism on something you created, rejection can feel like a judgment on your worth. But one of the most liberating truths you can internalize is this: rejection is not personal. Most of the time, it says far more about circumstances than it does about your value. People often internalize rejection because they tie their identity to outcomes. If something fails, they believe they are a failure. If someone doesn't want them, they assume they are unlovable. But rejection is almost never that clear cut. It's not always about you. It's about timing, context, fit, priorities, and perspectives. You can be the ripest peach in the world and still meet someone who just doesn't like peaches. That doesn't make you less ripe. It just means you were in front of the wrong person at the wrong time. Think about how many decisions you make every day that have nothing to do with other people's value. You choose what you eat, who you text back, which emails you delete, what you scroll past. Not because those things aren't worthy, but because they didn't fit your needs in the moment. That's exactly how most rejection works. It's not a statement of your inadequacy. It's a reflection of someone else's reality. And when you start seeing rejection through that lens, it stops defining you. The fear of rejection keeps more people stuck than actual rejection does. It causes us to hold back, stay quiet, avoid trying. We pre-reject ourselves to avoid the discomfort of someone else doing it first. But when you realize rejection isn't a verdict, just data, you start to treat it differently. You begin to see it not as a wall, but as a redirection, a message that says, not here, so you can go find a place that says, yes, here. Every no makes room for a better yes, but only if you keep moving forward. Taking rejection personally can poison your self-worth. It creates narratives that don't belong to you. I'm not good enough. I'm unworthy. I'll never succeed. These are lies, rejection whispers. When we forget that our value is not up for debate, just because someone couldn't see your potential, does it mean it's not there? Just because someone walked away, does it mean you're unlovable? Their perception is not your identity. Their silence is not your truth. What if, instead of fearing rejection, you started to collect it like evidence of your courage? Every time you get rejected, it means you showed up, you tried, you stepped forward when others stayed in the shadows. That's not weakness, that's strength. The people who achieve the most in life are the ones who've been told no the most because they kept showing up to hear it. And eventually the right yes found them, not because they were never rejected, but because they weren't defined by it. Rejection also teaches resilience. It forces you to get clear on who you are beyond approval. It sharpens your purpose, tests your commitment, and humbles your ego. Sometimes rejection is the universe's protection. That job you didn't get, that relationship that didn't last, that opportunity that slipped away. You may not understand why in the moment, but in time you'll look back and realize it created space for something greater. What feels like loss now often becomes alignment later. So, the next time rejection knocks on your door, don't shrink, don't spiral. Instead, take a deep breath and remind yourself, this isn't about my worth. It's about the world rearranging itself. Something better is still unfolding. This no does not define me. How I respond to it does. There's a quiet, unshakable freedom that comes when you begin to rely on yourself, not in a cold, isolated, I don't need anybody kind of way, but in a grounded, self-trusting, deeply rooted way. It's the kind of freedom that says, I am enough to carry myself through this. For most of us, that kind of self-reliance has to be learned, not because we aren't capable of it, but because we've been taught to doubt our instincts and look outside of ourselves for direction. From childhood, we're conditioned to seek approval before action. We ask teachers if our answers are correct. We ask parents if we're allowed. We wait for society to tell us what is acceptable. And slowly, this habit of seeking permission becomes a dependency. We begin to fear acting without consensus, without applause, without a safety net. But real freedom, the kind that can't be taken away, comes only when you start trusting your own voice more than the noise around you. That's when your life starts to become yours. Self-reliance doesn't mean you never fall down. It doesn't mean you never need help or connection. It means that even when you fall, even when no one is there to help you up, you know how to get back up on your own. It means you don't live in fear of abandonment or rejection because your sense of security isn't built on someone else's presence. You become your own anchor, your own compass. And that inner strength can be shaken by external circumstances. Too many people are waiting for someone else to carry them across the finish line. They wait for a partner to make them feel whole, a job to validate their identity, a mentor to open the perfect door. But here's the truth. The longer you wait for someone else to build your life, the longer you'll live in a cage of dependency. You may survive that way, but you will never thrive. Thriving requires autonomy. It requires initiative. And that comes only when you stop waiting and start building with what you have right now. There is something profoundly empowering about knowing that you can depend on yourself. When you begin to take full ownership of your actions, your mindset, your growth, you start living from a place of agency. You stop blaming other people for your circumstances. You stop waiting for the ideal conditions. You realize that you may not control everything that happens to you, but you absolutely control how you respond to it. And that makes all the difference. Self-reliance is not about perfection. It's about accountability. It's not saying, I don't need anyone ever. It's saying, even if no one shows up, I will. It's about showing up for yourself day after day, especially when it's hard, especially when no one is watching, especially when no one is clapping. It's a practice, a discipline, and a mindset. And once you develop it, you no longer live in fear of being left behind or let down because you've learned to stand on your own 2 feet. And from that foundation, that strong, self-reliant foundation, all other forms of freedom begin to grow. Emotional freedom, creative freedom, financial freedom, spiritual freedom. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop saying, I can't because, and start asking, how can I? You become the kind of person who creates paths instead of waiting for one to appear. That's not ego. That's empowerment. That's resilience. That's what it means to truly own your life. So much of the fear we carry, fear of being alone, of failing, of being misunderstood, begins to dissolve when we become self-reliant. Because when you trust yourself, you stop needing everyone else to understand you. You stop needing every plan to be perfect. You stop needing constant reassurance. Instead, you walk forward with quiet confidence, knowing that whatever happens, success or setback, you have the strength to face it, to learn from it, and to grow beyond it. Growth is not a gentle process. It doesn't happen while you're curled up in comfort or stuck inside your routine. It happens in discomfort, in disruption, in the uneasy moments when you are stretched beyond what feels safe or familiar. And yet, many people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort at all costs, not realizing that by doing so, they are also avoiding transformation. You cannot become someone new while clinging to who you were. Think of any major life change, learning a new skill, ending a toxic relationship, moving to a new city, starting a business, telling the truth for the first time. None of those things feel easy in the beginning. They require courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to step into the unknown. Discomfort is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. And the longer you avoid crossing it, the longer you stay stuck in a version of life that no longer fits who you're becoming. People often confuse discomfort with danger, but they are not the same. Danger is a signal to stop. Discomfort is often a signal to pay attention and lean in. The fear that arises in discomfort is usually not rooted in reality. It's rooted in the stories you've told yourself about what might happen. What if I fail? What if they laugh? What if I'm not good enough? But growth doesn't come from certainty. It comes from action in the presence of fear. If you wait to be fearless, you'll wait forever. Discomfort is also where your identity gets redefined. When you leave the familiar behind, the people, the patterns, the places, you're left with a blank page. It's disorienting at first, but also deeply powerful because it's in that space that you get to ask the real questions. Who am I when no one is validating me? Who do I want to become now that I've outgrown who I was? The answers don't always come quickly, but they come honestly. And that honesty is what builds authenticity. Most people want the outcome of growth without the process. They want the strength without the struggle, the wisdom without the wounds, the confidence without the risk. But every person you admire has walked through their own fire. They've had seasons of discomfort that forced them to rise. They didn't get there by skipping the pain. They got there by learning from it, by staying when it was hard, by growing roots in places where it would have been easier to run. We tend to glorify comfort as a sign of success, the stable job, the predictable routine, the familiar relationships. But comfort can become a cage. It keeps you small. It tells you this is good enough. Don't rock the boat. But growth always asks more of you. It asks you to speak the truth when silence is safer. It asks you to walk away when staying feels easier. It asks you to show up when everything inside you wants to disappear. And in saying yes to that challenge, you become more of who you were meant to be. Discomfort also teaches resilience, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, enduring kind. It teaches you how to keep going when the applause stops, how to trust yourself when the path gets dark, how to rebuild when things fall apart. Every uncomfortable experience becomes a brick in the foundation of your strength. It's in the moments you wanted to quit but didn't that your character is forged. Discomfort strips away illusions and shows you what you're really made of. So if you're feeling stretched, if you're uncertain, if you're standing in the middle of something that feels messy and unfamiliar, don't run. Don't numb it, avoid it, or wait for it to pass. This is the place where growth is happening. This is where the future version of you is being built, not in ease, but in effort, not in perfection, but in persistence. Growth doesn't ask you to be ready. It asks you to be willing. There will come a time when you realize that the world doesn't hand you purpose. It doesn't assign you meaning like a job title or a name tag. You don't wake up one day and find a pre-written script that says, this is who you are, this is what you're meant to do. Instead, you must create your own meaning, piece by piece, choice by choice. And that realization, while daunting, is also liberating, because if no one else can define your purpose, then no one else can take it away. Many people spend their lives waiting to be told what their lives should be about. They look to institutions, relationships, social roles, seeking someone or something to give them a sense of worth. But those things shift. Jobs change, people leave, praise fades. If your sense of meaning is attached to something outside of you, it will always be fragile. True meaning is something you build from the inside out. It begins the moment you stop asking, what do they want from me? And start asking, what do I want my life to stand for? Creating your own meaning doesn't mean you have all the answers. It means you're willing to explore the questions. It means choosing values that matter to you, not because they're trendy or approved, but because they feel true. It's about deciding what kind of impact you want to make, what kind of person you want to be, and how you want to spend your time in this world. That's not a one-time decision. It's a lifelong conversation with yourself, one that evolves as you grow. Too often people chase someone else's version of success, thinking it will fulfill them. They climb ladders they didn't choose, pursue dreams that don't belong to them, and wonder why they feel empty at the top. That's what happens when you don't define your own meaning. You become a character in someone else's story. And eventually you realize that applause doesn't equal alignment. Accomplishment without authenticity always leaves a void. Meaning doesn't have to be grand or public to be real. It doesn't have to impress anyone. It can be quiet, personal, intimate. Maybe your meaning is found in creating art, raising a child, planting a garden, starting a conversation, helping someone heal. What matters is that it's yours, that it lights something inside you that no one else can ignite. Purpose isn't about performance, it's about connection to yourself, to others, to something deeper than ego. There will be seasons when meaning feels far away, when everything feels uncertain and your path feels blurred. In those moments, the instinct is to retreat or give up, but often those are the very moments when meaning is being formed in the background. Struggle has a way of revealing what truly matters. It strips away the distractions and clarifies your values. Pain and confusion, while difficult, can be fertile ground for a new purpose if you're willing to stay present and listen to what they're teaching you. Creating meaning also requires you to give up the illusion of control. You don't get to dictate every outcome, but you do get to choose how you engage with the process. You get to decide whether you'll approach life with bitterness or with curiosity, whether you'll shrink from hardship or grow through it, whether you'll live passively or actively create the life you want. That is your power. And no one, not failure, not rejection, not fear, can take that power from you unless you give it away. So when the world feels loud and confusing, when other people's opinions threaten to drown out your truth, return to this simple but powerful question. What gives my life meaning? Not what looks impressive, not what earns the most validation, but what feels right, what feels aligned, what feels like home. Because in the end, the most meaningful life is not the one that checks all the boxes, it's the one that reflects who you truly are. So yes, maybe the world isn't watching you the way you thought it would. Maybe no one is coming to save you, to hand you a roadmap to validate every step you take. Maybe nobody cares, at least not in the way you once hoped. But here's the deeper truth. You don't need them to. Because once you stop seeking constant approval and start seeking your own truth, something shifts. You become the author of your own life. You realize that meaning, power, and peace come from within, not from applause, not from permission. Let the world underestimate you. Let them overlook you. Let them misunderstand you. That's not your burden to carry. Your job is not to convince anyone of your worth. It's to know it deeply, live it boldly, and protect it fiercely. When you finally stop waiting for the world to care, you make space for something better. You begin to care for yourself fully, relentlessly, without apology. Because in the end, when nobody cares, that's exactly when you learn to care enough to rise,